Hey guys, we're here to review the film Get Out, directed by Jordan Peele. This movie, I think of it as a traditional horror thriller film, and I think a lot of people can see it like that too. But it definitely
It subverts your expectations really quickly on what it is. But we were talking about before we started recording, produced by Blumhouse, which is The Conjuring and like Sinister as well. The kind of monolith of like modern horror. So it's shot kind of color wise the same. It feels like that, and then holy crap, you're in this crazy race cult that's stealing brains.
And I didn't know that before, but now seeing that, I can actually tell. This is actually one of the movies that me and him have both seen before.
I think the first we both have.
The first one we've actually seen before doing these assignments. So
your second viewing though, which means a lot, right?
Yeah.
Like the second
there
time.
There was a lot of things that I noticed this time that I didn't quite catch the first time. One of the main ones that really stood out was the opening scene. Right, it's a guy getting abducted by someone in a nice Porsche, and so he gets abducted. And the first time watching this, I didn't realize that later in the movie it's actually the guy with the cap, even though they had a whole scene where they talked about it, him and the TSA agent friend. But I actually didn't notice that. I guess it was just his clean face and
with the 1950s clothing on. He looked pretty different. He gets kidnapped, and then we jump to what's our lead's name? I'm sorry, I don't know why I've forgotten. I know it's Daniel Kaluuya.
Yeah.
Chris.
Mm-hmm.
Chris is getting ready to go to a trip to his new girlfriend's parents' house for the first time, and he's black. Yeah. And so the first scene we get is him broaching the subject. Do they know?
Yeah, it's kind of a big dilemma for him because, as from this first scene, you can tell this movie's going to be a lot about race and the culture in America, and
it broaches a subject immediately that I think speaks to the black experience more than I know. I've never thought about that, but that's probably kind of a typical if you're a black guy dating a white chick, do your parents know? Are you going to warn them before we have the face to face?
Yeah.
So instantly, both of the characters feel super humanizing.
Mm-hmm.
Continue with the plot.
And not much happens. They talk about it. You can tell they're in love. They're heading out. The next big race moment that happens, which I feel like that's a really big
that's the point
factor
of the
to
movie.
This movie. Yeah. And
Jordan Peele takes the kind of classic horror movie and frames this huge race thing in it, which is what makes it so interesting. Mm-hmm. You can call it a popcorn movie and also get some value out of it.
Yeah. So they hit this deer, call the police and everything, and the cop asks Chris for his ID, and this is kind of Chris is kind of I'm not part of what happened, so. Or he says he's going to give her.
He wants to just give it away because that's it's pretty clear that the cop's kind of hassling him because he's African American, and
his girlfriend stands up for him, and he appreciates this, because he knew the cop was kind of stepping out of line, asking him for his ID, but she stood up for him, and he really liked this. So after that, they make it to the house, and previously his girlfriend said, "My parents are the whitest people ever, and they're gonna
say
do real
corny
things to you, and he's gonna say how much he could vote for Obama a third time if he could." Mm-hmm. And so we get the little intro and the tour of the house and everything, and you can tell Chris is kind of timid to,
he's being a pretty cool new boyfriend.
He's being a good new boyfriend, but he's kind of timid to meet him a little bit.
Kind of quickly, you get everybody, all the actors. You got Dad's a big charismatic guy, Dean. Mm-hmm. Missy, you find out, is a psychologist who has developed a new type of. Or no, that comes a little later. But she does.
They talk about that at the dinner table, which there's actually no real confrontation up until the dinner table scene, and then that's when we meet the brother, and he goes on this.
It's into MMA and he's a little aggressive.
Yeah.
They also, that's the first time you get something weird. They talk about his genetic structure, which I think you mentioned on second viewing. You're like, oh man, they're already like bringing that stuff up.
And that's something that, them talking about genetics and the whole build up, which we learn why they're talking about that, because they're freaks that abduct people's bodies, other brains in them. But that's a real, like, you're kind of, the first viewing I was like, why are they talking about all this? This is super weird. And so we get that scene. The brother almost fights him, and
it gets like kind of comes over like he's gonna put him in a headlock, and he's clearly drunk, and kind of you already know his personality pretty quickly. Like when he shows up sober, he's a little loose cannon-y. You can feel the vibe. So that brings us to the next day. Mm-hmm. Is that the first? Is that when they meet, or is there another day in between? I don't know why.
That night, he
goes to smoke.
And we get the crazy grandpa running scene, and so that freaks him out. The next day, he approaches him to be like, "Hey man, what's up?" He gives him like a little snarky comment, like, "They got you working good out here," like referring to slaves and stuff.
I think it's important that he like. To note that he's like, hey brother, kind of like gives him the Ebonic, and this guy has like the most straight laced like 1950s mid-Atlantic style of talking. And the viewer first time you don't understand, you're kind of like, this is some weird stuff, and even the we figure out it's their grandma, but it's their housekeeper. Oh, right? Well, and it is noted on the first day. We didn't miss that when Dean's giving the house tour. He's like, I know it's weird, black housekeepers, but when my parents were sick, they, and he like twisted as, he just kept them hired.
And they have an excuse for everything, it seems. They're the psychopathic killers, which that makes sense.
From the first scene and the other two, we've already let the cat out of the bag. The grandparents, who are the housekeepers, like obviously they've done this to a few black people. Like, oh, come on in, and then boom. And that's another interesting point as we go later into the movie, that you can tell they're like trained. Like, they know everything they need to be doing. So which is scary.
So after that whole kind of aggressive scene he has with him, like you can tell, Grandpa, I guess, is on edge. And he goes back in, addresses it to his girlfriend. His girlfriend's like, you don't need to worry about anything. I love you. My family is going to love you too, essentially. And then we figure out about the party they're going to have. We don't skip to the next day. Some things happen, but I feel like the biggest, weirdest signs for Chris is in the party day. Yeah. I mean, that's the party day is kind of everything, right? Because it's the party night. It's the climax, and it's kind of the whole family, or the kind of cult, you'd say. All the people that are involved with the brain transplant thing. This is kind of like their come meet our donor.
The open house. The open house for somebody's body.
Yeah, exactly. We did skip the scene with the mother.
The hypnotizing
scene.
That's what I was confused with whether, but that was
because that happens the night before.
When he smokes and then he walks back in, and she's like, smoking's a really bad habit. And while, he thinks he's sitting down talking with her about, smoking, and then she goes, you want to know how it works. Whole time she's doing this, she has a tea glass, a tea mug, and she's scraping it. And the sound design gets weird as we go into it, because she's hypnotizing him with
that's where we get some of the really good traditional horror music. It's... I say this movie's a lot like a traditional horror film to me.
You can do like stings and a couple of the I think before, when he's outside smoking, you see Grandma and she like turns and walks away, and you get like all of that old stuff, that classic stuff.
So So the party day after he
so
goes
she
into the sunken
hypnotizes
place,
him, goes into the sunken place, and then he does quit smoking.
Yeah. He's at the same time he's kind of talking to his TSA agent friend, and he's kind of like the comic relief of
super
the
good
movie.
comic relief character.
And he's telling him all these things. We figure out in the end of the movie he's right, but he's telling all these things, and Chris isn't listening to him.
Mm-hmm.
So the day of the party, Chris meets all these weird people, and he's really uneasy about it. The one person he does meet ends up being his body donor or his brain donor receiver.
Oh yeah, so he's not having any good connections with anybody. Really,
they're all saying real weird things.
Yeah, clearly sizing him up.
Mm-hmm.
And then sit down with one cool guy. It's like a kind of a like he just is everywhere, but he's one of my favorite actors ever, Stephen Root.
Mm-hmm.
And he's blind, but he's a photography agent. So you kind of, if you've already figured it out by now, you know who he likes him.
Yeah, and Chris has a connection with this guy because it's weird. He knows all this photography and stuff, and yeah, exactly like you said. We wonder why they had a good connection. So that day happens. He takes a picture of the only other black man that came to the party, not counting Grandma and Grandpa, and this is where we see.
Well, we didn't really mention his character after the switch, but like the guy who's kidnapped in the beginning is now with this pretty unattractive in her 60s white lady, and it's alluded to that they're dating, especially as it goes on, and Chris kind of does the same thing he does with Walter, the grandfather. And it's like, hey, what's up, man?
Mm-hmm.
It's glad to see another brother here.
Yeah.
And the guy's like, oh, yes, indeed. And so, he's like, this guy, he's weird. Look at his outfit. And I think he kind of wants to just, clown on him for his outfit, He's
telling a big story. Chris thinks he recognizes him, so he's telling a big story, I guess like an old white person would. And then he goes to record him. And then he takes a picture instead, and the flash brings the person's brain back from the sunken place.
Yeah, you see some light behind their eyes, and his nose starts bleeding, and then he's like, "Get out, and that's where we get our title from.
That's kind of when Chris is like, something real weird's going on here, and
he goes up to call his friend, or no, it's the next time that the phone's unplugged because he got the phone obviously at this point.
And let's kind of skip towards the end where everything breaks. Everything goes crazy. Chris decides we need to get out of here. Right before him and his girlfriend are gonna leave, he checks in the closet and sees pictures of his girlfriend with all kinds of other black friends, including black guys.
And the woman you see her, it's the people who are working there.
It's her grandmother,
and their relationship photos.
And we see this, and Chris is like, well, I don't know, I think she's gone.
It's in the middle of the night, and
he's really battling with is this my girlfriend or is this an enemy now?
Yeah, I think he more or less knows at this point. But he knows she has access to the keys, So he's like, let's go. If it's just me and you outside, then we can talk about me dipping out or get down the road and not setting. Either way, his option as soon as he sees that is to get out of the house. He walks downstairs. Everybody's awake, just looking at him. And there's a pretty good tense scene with Daniel Kaluuya, just like, Rose, give me the keys, and everybedy's kind of closing in. And right at the last second, she pulls the keys out. She's like, I'm not going to give you these,
And so they beat him. They tie him up in a room. This real creepy scene where he's with the blind photographer guy that's going to receive his brain, tells him all these things.
Yeah, so he gets put in a hypnotized, kind of almost torture. He's just for, I think, a day and a half, maybe even 2 days.
Yeah, it's for about 2 days because we get... The
TSA
guy goes to the FBI, or is it the FBI? I think it's the FBI.
It might be, or I think it might just be the local, the police.
And he tells him this whole idea of what's going on.
Which is actually very on Reddit, except for maybe the sex slave part.
Yeah.
It's like,
and they just laugh in his face, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" So he's on his own. We skip back to Chris. He actually stuffs from the
the whole time you get some good little stings of him scratching while he's being
Yeah.
hypnotized and can't really move.
And he plugs his ears with the cotton, and we can't, we don't know this until after the tea scene comes in, and then that's a real good switch up.
It shows him like pass out when the next time the tea happens.
Yeah.
But then they come in to start the surgery. They're all in scrubs.
Yeah.
And he's awake the whole time.
Yeah.
So he gets a croquet ball, which is another just fun. I feel like there's so many times that Jordan Peele is just saying like kind of laughing at white people for that, which is funny. Like beating somebody to death with a croquet ball is like, so I guess like only a rich white person would have a nice set in their house,
So basically he fights his way out of the house, and the movie ends with Chris making it out, taking down the whole weird cult family.
Yeah, and that's where you get like so many payoffs for like how kind of weird this family is. It doesn't hold back with like the violence on everybody.
Yeah.
He gets Walter, the older one, the grandpa, to snap out of it. Yeah. Forget what his camera maybe.
Yeah,
he reaches over and hits his camera light,
and
that guy kind of takes out the last two, and his friend shows up right on time,
and then movie just ends with Chris surviving and defeating the weird psychopath cult people.
Yeah.
What can you really define about the movie with the classic horror?
It's like its place in history, or like what's important about it. I think the big thing is obviously taking what's been a pretty whitewashed industry, horror movies, and making it super like black focused is interesting. I think that was what everybody freaked out with Jordan Peele with his first two movies. Now Nope, I think he's like the next Steven Spielberg. But
I need to see those new ones. I think his movies are very simplistic. Like he doesn't try to go too crazy with any of the things. He does very good switch ups.
The like framing of the plot is super standard. Yeah. Like you think you're in for the normal ride, but he says so much with it. Yeah. And that's what made this movie super fun in 2017.
You said like every scene has symbolism or some kind of driving factor.
Yeah, there's so much of it.
Yeah, and then race is obviously a massive part of this movie. The dilemma, especially in 2017, race, till now, race is a very big part of our society, and this movie kind of, does a socio-political turn, I guess, or not turn, but it's part of the movie's,
Yeah, and it gets
plot
to be more and more. You think it starts with just the light, like, do your parents know I'm black? And at the end, he's, like
fighting for his life.
They're a genetic hierarchical like freak show. I don't know. These guys they think black is the new fashion.
Exactly. Yeah.
And they're using their brains, man.
Yeah.
It's wild.
So I think it's definitely going to be a legendary movie, but
and it set Jordan Peele up to be one of my most interesting directors. Like I'm not going to miss another one of his movies for a while.
So on that note, that was the movie for this week, and I want to appreciate you all viewing us.
Yeah, thank you.